Hey Lions fans, welcome back to Detroit Focus. There is a lot happening around this team right now. A new running back signing, more fallout from the Terrion Arnold situation, and a genuinely heated debate about whether one of Detroit's young defensive backs can even stay on the field long enough to matter. So let's get into all of it. Before we dive in, quick favor to ask. If you're new here or you've been watching for a while but haven't hit subscribe yet, please do it right now. We are closing in on 2,000 subscribers on this channel, and every single person watching this video is part of what gets us there. It costs nothing, takes one tap, and it genuinely helps this channel keep growing. So go ahead, subscribe, hit that bell, and let's get into today's Lions news. Let's start with the running back room, because Detroit made a move that flew a little under the radar this weekend. With the backfield banged up all camp long, the Lions signed veteran running back Terrion Williams, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals, to add a body to that room. Williams was a sixth-round pick out of Texas A&M back in 2019, and over his career he's carved out a reputation mostly as a special teams contributor rather than a featured ball carrier. We're talking about a veteran with dozens of games of NFL experience, but a very modest workload as an actual runner, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 career carries. So why bring in a guy like this right now? Simple. The Lions' backfield has taken a beating this camp. Sionvaki is banged up, Kai Robichaux is dealing with a broken foot, Jacob Saylor's picked up an ankle injury of his own in the preseason opener, and Isaiah Pacheco is still working his way back from that Meckel sprain. When you stack all of that together, you need bodies who can absorb practice reps and preseason snaps, so you're not asking your core guys, the ones you're actually counting on for the regular season, to carry an unnecessary workload while they're still trying to get healthy. Is Terrion Williams likely to make this 53-man roster? Realistically, probably not. This has the feel of a classic camp body signing, somebody brought in purely to fill out practice reps and help at the bottom of a crowded, currently injured position group. But that doesn't mean it's a pointless move. Depth signings like this are exactly what keeps a team from having to overextend its actual roster pieces during the most physically demanding stretch of the calendar. I'd call it a solid, unspectacular depth add, nothing more, nothing less. Now let's get into the story that just won't go away, because Terrion Arnold has officially found his next team. The former Lions first-round pick has reportedly agreed to a deal with the Seattle Seahawks, the reigning Super Bowl champions, joining a secondary that already features a star in Devin Witherspoon. And look, this is a story I've touched on before, but there's a fresh wrinkle worth discussing, which is the question a lot of fans keep asking. If another team is willing to take a chance on this guy, does that mean the Lions made a mistake cutting him loose in the first place? I don't think so, and here's why. This wasn't purely a football decision for Detroit. Arnold's release came in the wake of a serious legal situation that is still working through the court system, and I want to be careful here, because that process hasn't run its course and nothing has been proven in a court of law. But regardless of how that legal matter ultimately resolves, there's also a separate issue at play here about trust inside the building. Multiple reports out of Detroit have indicated that the organization felt burned by how transparent or how untransparent Arnold was with the coaching staff and front office as this situation was unfolding. When you combine a serious off-field legal matter with a breakdown in trust between a player and the people running the organization, that's not really a talent evaluation anymore. That's a culture and character decision. And under this current Lions regime, led by Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, that kind of decision has consistently leaned toward protecting the locker room and the organization's identity over squeezing out every last bit of talent from a roster spot. It's also worth mentioning that New York Giants head coach John Harbaugh spoke publicly about why his team was willing to bring Arnold in for a workout, essentially saying that in a league with such tight margins, teams have to be aggressive about exploring any player who might be able to help them win. And that's a completely fair philosophy, honestly. Different franchises are always going to weigh risk and reward differently depending on where they are as an organization, what their needs are, and what kind of culture they're trying to build or protect. The fact that the Giants, the Seahawks, and a handful of other teams were willing to bring Arnold in for a look doesn't automatically mean Detroit got it wrong. It just means different franchises are running their operations with different priorities right now, and that's normal across the NFL. This isn't a case where I think anybody should be rooting against Arnold as a person, either. Plenty of talented players have found their way back from difficult situations before, and hopefully whatever happens with his legal case, he's able to get his life sorted out for the long term. But that doesn't change the reality that keeping him wasn't the right fit for where the Lions are trying to go as an organization this season. I want to pause here for a second, because we're right in the middle of a pretty meaty topic and I don't want to blow past this moment. If you're finding value in this kind of honest, direct breakdown of what's happening with this team, subscribing to Detroit Focus is the best way to support that. We're so close to 2,000 subscribers, and every person watching right now is part of getting us there. So please, tap that subscribe button if you haven't, and let's keep going because we've got one more topic, and it's a spicy one. Let's talk about Ennis Rakestraw, because there is a real growing frustration building among parts of this fan base, and I think it's worth addressing directly instead of dancing around it. Rakestraw picked up an arm injury during the preseason opener against the Bengals, and in the immediate aftermath, most of the reporting framed it as good news, pointing out that X-rays came back clean and that Dan Campbell himself downplayed the severity, calling it something closer to a contusion than a structural issue. On the surface, that sounds like a relief. But here's the thing that's harder to ignore the longer this pattern continues. This isn't the first time, or even the second time, that Rakestraw has picked up an injury during a Lions practice or game. He missed almost the entirety of last season with a shoulder injury that derailed what was supposed to be a breakout year, and now he's already banged up again in the very first preseason game of this new season. So, is it fair to start asking tougher questions about his ability to simply stay on the field? I think it is, and I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for fans and analysts to bring up. Availability is genuinely one of the most underrated traits in professional football. A talented player who can't consistently be out there is functionally not that different from a less talented player who can. And when you look at where Rakestraw currently sits on the depth chart, with names like Khalil Dorsey and Roger McCreary reportedly ahead of him in this cornerback competition, and with reports suggesting he's been inconsistent when he has been healthy enough to practice, it's a fair question to ask whether this is a make-or-break camp for him. Some analysts covering this team directly have floated him as a legitimate roster cut candidate heading into final roster decisions, and given the recurring health concerns layered on top of inconsistent play, that's not an unreasonable position to hold, even if it's a tough one for fans who were excited about his potential coming out of college to hear. To be clear, I'm not trying to pile on a young player here. Injuries happen in this sport, and shoulder injuries especially can be genuinely unpredictable and hard to fully bounce back from. But there's a real difference between a player who gets unlucky once and a player whose availability becomes a consistent, recurring storyline year after year, and right now, fairly or not, Rakestraw is squarely in that second category in the eyes of a lot of people who watch this team closely. The best ability in this league really is availability, and until he can string together a stretch of genuinely healthy, productive football, that question mark is going to keep following him. So where does that leave the Lions' secondary heading into the final stretch of the preseason? You've got a running back room getting extra veteran depth to survive a rough patch of injuries. You've got the Terrion Arnold chapter essentially closed from Detroit's side, with him moving on to a new opportunity in Seattle while his situation continues playing out elsewhere. And you've got a legitimate, uncomfortable conversation happening about whether one of the team's younger defensive backs can prove he belongs on this roster before final cuts arrive. It's a lot to track, but that's training camp for you, constant movement, constant evaluation, and no shortage of storylines. I want to hear from you on this one, Detroit. Drop a comment down below and tell me straight up, Is Ennis Rakestraw a legitimate cut candidate heading into final roster decisions, or are people being too harsh on a young player who's just run into some bad injury luck? I read every comment, so let's get a real conversation going down there. And before you go, one more time, because it genuinely matters to this channel. If you got value out of this breakdown, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Detroit Focus so you don't miss a single update as this roster continues to take shape. We are so close to 2,000 subscribers, and you watching right now are exactly who gets us there. Thanks for watching, thanks for riding with Detroit Focus, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Lions!
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.